All right. Well, welcome to, this is episode 22 of the Clive Barker podcast. Today is, as usual, Jose Leitao.
Hey there.
And I'm Ryan Danhauser. So we'll kind of start off with Clive Barker news. To start with, and Jose, you know a lot more about this than I do, Pyramid Gallery. So what can you tell us about what they have coming up?
Well, this is kind of a new project that's been popping up, and it's actually under development. So I'll just speak about the things that I think I can say without spoiling too much. This is actually being developed in partnership with Pyramid Gallery and Eric Gross. If you're on Facebook, you might want to check followers of the Pandorics. Eric Gross has been trying to get this book done for a few years, and it's the Toy Maker Magnum Opus, Volume 1. So it's supposed to be about Le Marchand and, the box designs that Eric Gross designed for Pyramid Gallery over the years. And it's a beautiful book. I've seen the contents of it, and I've seen several iterations of it over the years until the final product, which is actually being commercialized now. And you got a box design, you got a Cenobite, you got a little backstory. And the thing that is being developed right now is that Nicholas Vince, as well as Barbie Wilde. So Nicholas Vince and Barbie Wilde are involved in this as well, because they're actually developing with Eric Gross their own Pandorics. And what are Pandorics? Pandorics are basically, lament configuration boxes. So that's just the lingo that's been used for this to make it more of a more original kind of thing. We call it Pandorics, and these
that's
are being
kind of
developed.
like a more universal name, right, for a box that opens and things come out, or it opens the door to another world.
Yeah, it comes from Pandora's box, which, if you're familiar with the myth, you'll remember that Pandora was this very curious woman, and there was this box, and the box contained a lot of secrets and things that were locked in. And because she wanted to know what was in it so much, she opened it up, and all the things came out of it, and all the, bad things in the world came out of it, and hope was the last thing left in the box when she closed it. So it goes kind of like that. But you guys can check out the Pandora myth, easily on the internet or any books. So this Pandorics is the name that we use for these boxes, and they're being developed by Eric Gross for Barbie Wilde and Nicholas Vince, and they're looking really nice. Barbie Wilde's box is beautiful. It's got like crows, and it's got the female Cenobite in there on one of the faces, and if you guys go to Barbie Wilde's Facebook, I'm sure she has some images there. She even had a few of them as cover images for her Facebook. And Nicholas Vince also designed a very nice looking box. He's got some suggestions like incorporating angels and demons on the faces of these boxes, and I've seen sketches, and you can see sketches too if you go to Facebook and friend Eric Gross. That's Gorss. So it looks really nice, and from what I've heard, they're also developing backstories for it. And from what I hear, they're really, really good stories. Of course, that Nicholas Vince has recently published a book called "What Monsters Do," and he's a good writer.
And just for fledgling Clive Barker fans out there, of course, Nicholas Vince is the Chatterer in Hellraiser 1 and 2, and he's Kinski in Nightbreed. And Barbie Wilde was the female Cenobite in Hellraiser 2.
Yeah, and Barbie Wilde, also another accomplished writer. She was featured in the Hellbound Hearts anthology.
As was Nicholas Vince.
As was Nicholas Vince, yes. And she wrote the Sister Nicoletta story, Sister Celise. And from what I've heard, this new story being developed for the Pandoric might have something to do with that story she wrote for Hellbound Hearts. So no spoilers here, but you might see a return of some familiar figures. Just visit Followers of the Pandorics and check it out. we'll try to keep you posted about this as new developments arise.
All right.
And from now, it sounds like really exciting stuff to be looking forward to.
And they do really, really good work. Max...
is assistant gallery administrator of pyramidgallery.com.
Yeah.
And Eric Gross is also...
Yeah.
They're planning on actually producing these boxes in the future. So actual physical boxes for, these designs being developed with Nicholas Vince and Barbie Wilde. So
and I have the Hellraiser, Lament configuration box replica that they did, and it's way nicer, way higher quality than even like the Nika one that you get with the brass, panels on top of it. Highly recommended.
Oh yeah, you got one of those with a little glass dome over it, right?
And it has the music box inside.
Oh, it's the Black Box of Mourning, I think. That's one of the names they gave to the musical box, the Lament configuration from Hellraiser. So, yeah. All right, so that's it. Those designs are, you can check those out on Facebook, and we'll try to include a link for that on the show notes, so you can take a look at the sketches of these things as they develop.
And our next thing, there's a horror movie on Kickstarter called The Hanover House, and friend of the show, Ann Bobby, is going to be one of the stars of that. So go to Kickstarter and search for The Hanover House, Hanover. I've backed it too, but I think we'll put a link to it on the show notes as well. So yeah, if you want to see a new horror movie with Ann Bobby in it, go check that out.
It's apparently been filmed inside a real-life ghost-haunted house, or so Ann Bobby says.
Yeah.
So that makes it interesting. I think this is supposed to be kind of a ghost story movie.
Yeah.
Is it?
And she's been telling ghost stories that she personally has experienced on Facebook, in kind of preparation for this movie and to get people excited about this movie. And it's really interesting, actually, how... There are, some people, like, I've never in my life seen a ghost. But for some people, it is almost like, common experience.
Yeah, well, I'll just go out and say it. I just like ghost stories, but I don't believe in ghosts. But Ann Bobby has asked people to share their ghost stories on her wall.
Yeah.
I shared the story of my great-grandfather who beat up a guy who was pretending to be a ghost. That was a pretty funny story. I think she enjoyed it. Yeah. So, and some mysterious person sent her a book with the 50 best ghost stories.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, and she was like, hey, not very many people of you know where I live, so who sent this thing?
Yeah. That was funny. That was funny.
But I think she was flattered.
Yeah. Another interesting development has happened with the Cabal Cut, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll just sort of offhandedly, Russell Charrington mentioned that he just watched it on Blu-ray, and it looks great. So I think for us that sort of poses more questions than answers, but theoretically it would be you could have a less compressed version of it on a Blu-ray, I guess. I mean, if you need that much space.
No, I think you're probably. I think we discussed this when the news came out, because it came out like almost out of left field, and I was like, "What? You just watched the Cabal Cut on Blu-ray?
Yeah.
Thanks to Jimmy Johnson, it looks amazing. Can't wait for all you guys to see it too." And I'm like, "Whoa, what?"
Yeah.
So,
and with Russell's crazy schedule, we haven't really gotten a chance to ask him, "What does this mean?" But we're pretty sure that it means that it's just, instead of being on a DVD, it's on a Blu-ray.
But also, I think it might mean, like we were discussing yesterday. So, you guys told me that someone asked Russell, so when is it going to be coming out? And I think he said, well, hopefully next Halloween.
Yeah.
Which means like probably like by the end of October 2013. So I think that probably means that the VHS has been cooked or something, and and they already have like a good quality version of it, and they transferred it to the best possible quality on Blu-ray, because that would be awesome if it is. I mean, I wonder how this is going to affect future screenings. Are people still going to watch the Cabal cut like version 6.0 in DVD, or are they going to be watching like a better version?
Well, and even at a convention, like a high definition projector's only like $700. So it would make sense to me.
Or is he going to keep the HD transfer if there is one, or is he going to keep that for the restoration to work on and then eventually release? Yeah. So that, like you said, that raises more questions than answers, and I really hope that we can get to talk to Russell Sherrington soon and ask him, has it been transferred into HD? Has it VHS been baked, and does it look that good now? And all the dark scenes, are they fairly visible now? So that's something I really know.
We should look for a break in his schedule and then try to get him to come on maybe the podcast.
Yeah. Try to get in touch with him or Mark Miller and see what they say. That'd be great. So this is like an unofficial, unofficial / official Nightbreed Occupy Midian reports.
Yeah. We haven't had, and it's not like we've stopped doing the Occupy Midian reports. It's just that Crystal just moved into her house, so we're not pestering her, for this stuff right now.
Yeah. And, we're just waiting for good news to come over, and we'll eventually do another Occupy Midian report with all this goody news stuck in there for good measure. So that's really good. So hopefully next Halloween, that would be wonderful to have the Cabal cut of Night come out. Yeah, my God, that would be wonderful.
We'll have a party around the world.
Yeah. And someone asked, I wonder if they're going to make enough, if this is going to be a limited edition, I wonder if they're going to make enough Blu-rays for all the fans who want to buy a copy of it. And I was like, well, you guys better hurry, because I'm going to buy at least 2 or 3 copies of it when it comes out. Like one for me, one to keep, and another one maybe to give to my brother or something. So buy a copy for yourself, buy one for your friends. Anyway,
definitely. So next thing came via Revelations, Phil and Sarah's Clive Barker, or the official Clive Barker website, that there are some prints for sale, and some of them are only $10. On a place called orangealloy.com.
Yeah, some of them are posters from gallery exhibits that he did.
Like that one with life and birth and life and death, that Best Cutler one. I have one of those.
I think I have the program for that, because my friend Maureen, she got me a copy of that. Yeah. So. Yeah, the posters look really nice. Some of them are G-Clay prints. G-Clay.
Yeah, and those are more expensive. They're like $250.
That's basically a special kind of printing meant to, be printed on canvas instead of paper. So it's a fancier type of print.
Yeah. That's one of those words that I see in print all the time, and I never know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, I think it should be like G-Clay or G-Clay. Yeah. It has an accent on the E, so I would say G-Clay.
Yeah.
And some people collect those. I'm not really sure about how special they are, because basically they're full prints. They're just limited edition ones.
Yeah.
But, it's on canvas, so it looks better than on paper. So anyway.
Yeah. Someday I'd like to get an original Clive Barker painting.
Oh, yeah.
That might be my next thing to get, but, geez. It's a daunting task.
And whenever I see those exhibits, I look at them, and sometimes they have like ink on paper sketches that are actually like from a sketchbook. Mm-hmm. Those usually go for like $200 and $300, and then you get the larger ones, of course, the acrylics on canvas and all that stuff. They go for like $4,000, $5,000, $7,000. So I mean. Jeez.
Yeah.
I wish I could afford that. I wish I could have the pocket money for those.
I know.
But who knows? Maybe someday if I win the lottery. Anyway, I once posted about this this picture that I got from the this newsletter from the UK, from the official Clive Barker fan club. And one of them was a picture of Clive Barker laying on a gurney inside an operating room. And this was talking about a special from Granada Television called The Dissection of Clive Barker. And I posted that on Clive Barker's personal profile Facebook page. And he didn't really reply to that. I was asking, hey, Clive, what was this? And, how can we know more about this? And he didn't reply. But one of the things that Phil and Sarah in Revelations have posted on the interview updates was the dissection of Clive Barker.
Yeah.
So they have this little quote here, and it lists by the dissection of Clive Barker by David Richardson, the dissection of Clive Barker, Granada Television, 1990. And he has a quote from Clive Barker and a little picture of the special program on TV.
Mm-hmm.
So it says here, actually the quote about Clive Barker is, it's about sex and fantastic literature. Clive Barker just says, I've never really understood why so few writers of the fantastic want to write about sex. If we're talking about horror fiction has a lot to say about the body and about our relationship to the body and our control over our bodies, or the lack of control we have over our bodies. So I've always seen sex as being very much a part of fantastical writing. And it is fun to write. It really is. It puts a bloom on your cheeks at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. So the notes are, we'll add this one to the show notes. It's listed on the website now. I still like to know more about this. If anybody out there has any information about this program from Granada Television 1990, the dissection of Clive Barker, I'd love to, get to see it someday if you guys have it on a tape or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put it on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Share it. Share the wealth.
Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah, I'd never heard of that either. That's cool.
Then let me just see if I have any more news here. I don't think I do. So let me just... yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. All right. So on to our main topic, which is Clive Barker's first full-length novel, The Damnation Game. This was written in 1985, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So, and the edition that I have was I think the first American edition, but it's 1987 is when mine came out. But yeah, so Damnation Game, the version I have is 360 pages, so not a huge read, not like some of his later books.
The Damnation Game came out in, the UK proof came out in 1985.
Okay.
It was published by Weidenfeld and Nicholson in London.
Yeah.
The version that I have is a paperback from Sphere Books, and it's, let me see, I think this is, I'm trying to find out, I think this is from 1993, actually, this paperback. It's a reprint. And it's got 532 pages.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the big one, like I told you. It's a little brick. It's a pocket book.
Yeah, wow.
And the cover is really nice because the cover of this book reminds me so much of The Thing by John Carpenter.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen that.
Yeah, because it's got Mamoulian shining his power through his wounds after he's attacked by Whitehead's dogs in the property. And you just see this guy with his arms slightly apart from his body. And there's this blue glow emanating from him. And it reminds me of the cover for The Thing, the movie.
The copy that I have has a box with a face on it.
Oh, okay. It's got the kind of a red cloud and the red fog in the background.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. And so...
Exactly.
That's the U.S.
edition.
And I think that it's the same. It's an Ace Putnam edition, and I wonder if it's the same people who did the covers for those paperback books of blood that have the Halloween masks with the gummy worms sticking out of the noses and things like that.
I never saw that.
I mean, it's an all right cover, but it doesn't really show. It just says basically this is a horror book. It doesn't really show anything about what the book is about.
Yeah, my Sphere book has this edge around the illustration of Mamulian glowing.
Yeah.
And the outer edge of the cover is painted by Clive Barker. It's got all these little characters. I think this comes from the Books of the Blood prints that he did.
Yeah.
He's got. Yeah.
So I think the overall tone of this book is that, he went from the Books of Blood straight into this novel, and it feels a lot more like a classic horror novel. It doesn't feel as much. It doesn't feel like it has as much fantasy as a lot of the later books do. There's only one. There's one world. There's not another world, somewhere where that people, other, creatures are coming from or anything like that.
Well, I disagree slightly with that, because I'll explain why. Because you do get to see like another plane of existence. There's like this darkness, this shadow that people start falling into, where you see this tree that's this tree full of white blossoms, and it kind of reminds me that this is like a place that's inside Mamulian's soul or something, but it also feels like it's a place where it actually exists. So it's like this darkness is inside him, and it's like another plane that you can just fall into and just disappear.
And it feels to me like, and this might be this might be just my interpretation, but it feels to me like Mamulian and this novel are kind of an expression of the fear that, what if when you die there's just nothing? What if there's no theology, there's no soul that migrates to another place. There's just darkness and emptiness and nothing. And I think that this character Mamulian, the longer he lived, and he's something like 200 years old by the end of the book, the more afraid he is of dying and of being of that nothingness that he sort of embraces.
Well, I think I see your point. Although this emptiness that Mamulian fears is not something that is absence of lack of existence. It's more like a thing where you can just dissolve into, and he wants company in there for the rest of eternity. So it's like you still exist to some level of afterlife, and it's really dark and lonely, and you still exist for eternities and eternities, and that's he basically wants someone he can share that with. So it's not like there's nothing afterwards. It's more like this vast emptiness is something you can still exist in. Yeah, and at least that's what I got from it.
We see this again in Lord of Illusions, right? I mean, reading this again for probably my third or fourth or whatever time, I couldn't believe how similar this novel is to Lord of Illusions. I don't know why I never made that connection before, but Nyx and Mamulian are really similar to each other.
Yeah. I remember a few years ago, I told that to our friend David from the Time Winds forum, and I was like, it's like the Lord of Illusions is a mix between The Last Illusion, but very, very, very loosely based on a few elements, like the characters' names are the same, but then the gist of the story comes more from the Damnation Game. Yeah, because it's like as Mamulian wants to go into the darkness and spend the rest of eternity with Whitehead. Yeah. Nyx wants to do the same with Swan.
And Mamulian felt like he taught Whitehead all of these things, and Whitehead is like an ingrate and just wants to separate himself from him, and it's this big betrayal. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that you and I kind of came to this same conclusion separately. You did probably a lot earlier than I did, but wow, I mean, Nyx is totally Mamulian.
Yeah, it reminds me completely of it. And I'm sure, a lot of people who have seen both things probably came to the same conclusions anyway.
Well, and Mamulian is, they're both characters are really selfish. I mean, in that they they will manipulate and murder and take advantage of people to get whatever they want. And the second that you start to feel just a little bit of sympathy to Mamoulian in this novel, he does something horrible. And then it's like, oh yeah, never mind. I don't feel bad.
Even though sometimes he'll do something horrible, but like there's a line in the book where someone gets murdered. I'm trying to steer away from spoilers.
I think we're trying to recommend the novels. So
yeah, so there's someone who gets murdered in a gruesome way, and then Marty Strauss, who's one of the main character of the book, he asks Joseph Whitehead, who's this guy that fears Mamoulian is coming back for him. Yeah. He says, there's a dead body outside the room, and he says, oh, okay. And he asks, did Mamoulian kill her? And Whitehead replies, oh, him? Oh, no, his hands are clean. You could probably drink milk from them. So it's like this guy who manipulates people and uses others to make his dirty work. Yeah. And it's almost like he's kind of a puppeteer of sorts, because there's this character in the book called Breer, which basically he's this monster. He's this monstrous character. He's this fat guy who's a cannibal and a pedophile, and
he's a razor eater.
He's one of the razor eaters. It's like Clive does this all the time. He creates this kind of adjective, or this kind of special name for a character, and oftentimes he'll just use that name instead of the character's actual name. Like in this case, sometimes he uses the name Breer, sometimes he just uses the razor eater to describe him. And it's this character who would eat razor blades, like they were, communion hosts or something. Yeah. And there's a really funny scene at the end of the book, which I'm not going to mention, but it involves the blades being discovered. Well, maybe we can mention this later on. But for now, it's like this character Breer is just a terrible monster, and we actually see him as he's trying to end his miserable life, and Mamoulian rescues him back and puts him in his employ. And this is the character who's going to be like doing Mamoulian's dirty work over the book. Yeah. So it's a really cool character. I could see echoes of like Butterball, Cenobite, in this guy. Yeah. Yeah. I guess, there's like this scene where he's actually stowing his blades inside his own body, and it's just like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, he's dead. I mean, he's kind of a zombie, and I hate to spoil that, but it's kind of obvious right from the start. And as this character moves along through the story, he doesn't quite understand that, and his mind and his body are rotting, and he tries to find ways to cope with that.
He keeps splashing cologne on himself because he feels this weird smell coming, and he's like, "Oh, better splash some cologne."
Sandalwood.
And he's actually rotting. So, it's a very gruesome character. It really creeped me out reading the Breer segments of the story.
Yeah, and it's been so long since I've read it. I felt real legitimate suspense through a lot of this novel.
So for an opening novel for a budding writer like Clive, I would say he did a really, really amazing job, to begin with. It's a really cool novel for a first novel. Mm-hmm. I enjoy this one as much as I enjoy The Great and Secret Show and other books like that.
I think its shortcomings might just be personal preference on some people's part, maybe on my part. But its shortcomings are, number one, there are very, very few sympathetic characters. Like even Marty Strauss, he's kind of a lout. He's not particularly bright. He's kind of arrogant and pushy and quick to get angry, and I don't know. And he's an ex-con. there's Marty. There is Karis, who is Whitehead's daughter, and she's almost sympathetic, but then she's also a junkie. She's addicted to heroin. And then Whitehead, her father, actually gave her the heroin. And he's pretty selfish, and when Marty and he start to almost get to get close, almost become friends, he just treats him like garbage.
Yeah, he does that all the time until there's a dinner party that gets crashed by Mamulian, and after that, in the aftermath, we see like Marty kind of confronts Whitehead and says, you've been treating me like garbage. You got to tell me what's going on, And Whitehead finally crumbles, and he goes like, okay, you want to know the truth? I'll tell you the truth. Yeah. And that's the only moment where I felt like they really come close to being, at least Whitehead becoming honest with Marty.
Yeah.
And that's the first time. And that takes place almost halfway through the book.
Yeah.
Because up to that point, he just treats him like, maybe we should go into why Whitehead hires Marty.
So Marty was a prisoner, and as sort of a condition of his parole, he would be working for Whitehead and staying on the grounds and acting as his personal bodyguard.
Yeah. This takes place in Wandsworth Prison, which is in near London. And that's where we see Marty for the first time. There's this guy called Mr. Toy, who comes in and talks to and interviews him for a position as a bodyguard. Yeah, like you said.
And you get the feeling that Toy had Marty's position in the past, but he's gotten old, and so he's looking for someone to be more of the bodyguard, and Toy is kind of more of his supervisor.
Possibly, although Pearl is the cook for Whitehead. Yeah. She mentions that there was another guy just recently who left back to prison, who was actually Marty's replacement. Toy to me seemed to be more like number two, like you said, like a manager, like someone. Yeah,
But he was also a boxer, right? And I think that
right.
I think that in the past he probably started out as a bodyguard.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah, probably he also started out like that, and then he just moved on because he saw the potential. And it could be that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So basically, the book opens up. Just to mention the opening, it opens up in Warsaw in the middle of World War II, and we're introduced to this character called the Thief, which we'll find out later actually is Joseph Whitehead.
Yeah.
And this guy is he makes a living out of going through the war theater and just picking up pieces of art and whatever he can find and sell, and he makes his living like that. And he just starts listening to these stories about the card player who is Mamulian, is this character who would never lose a card game, and
he learns that people sort of put their life on the line in these card games.
A lot of people would basically gamble away everything they have, and of course he later finds, and beyond whatever they had in terms of physical possessions, they would also gamble away pretty much their lives.
Yeah.
And there's this lieutenant called Vasiliev, which really cool story behind that. But not going to spoil it too much. But Vasiliev was this Russian lieutenant, and he also is one of the guys who actually helps him find Mamulian, and he dies in the process. And of course, we have few revelations after that. So not trying to spoil anything. So, but this flashback ends as Whitehead starts to play a card game with Mamulian inside this crumbled building full of, I think there's an altar, like a wooden altar that has been placed inside the room and all that. There's a bunch of plundered objects of art. And then they start playing the game, and Mamulian calls the thief Pilgrim, which, he'll come back to that later in the book when Whitehead meets Mamulian, and he calls him Pilgrim.
So sometimes the narrator calls him the thief, and Mamulian calls him the Pilgrim, and everybody else calls him Mr. Whitehead.
Yeah, that's pretty much accurate. And I like I said, you were talking about the shortcomings of the book, and you were saying that there's few people who we can sympathize with. And I don't know if you're going to mention this, but I think maybe one of the shortcomings of the book that a lot of people complain about is maybe the ending being too vague.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that.
Although Clive does tend to tie up all the little loose ends, like, Weir and Karis.
Yeah.
And Karis and Marty and, Chad and what's the name of the other kid? Thomas and Chad, who are two Mormon kids who appear in the part called the Deluge, right?
Yeah.
Because this book is divided into parts, so they all have this, extremely symbolic meaning. The first part is Terra Incognita, which means unknown land.
Yeah.
Second is Asylum. The third part is Duce, or Deuce.
Yeah.
The fourth part is The Thief's Tale. The fifth part is The Deluge.
Yeah.
And that's the last. Basically, the Deluge is because these kids, these Mormon kids, meet Mamulian. They're kind of swayed by his rhetoric, and they think that Mamulian is about to bring forth the end of the world, and that Whitehead is actually the Antichrist. They're a couple of goofy kids. They're more evil than innocent.
And also they've been a little bit hypnotized by Mamulian as well, too, because some of the conclusions they come to don't make sense even for religious fanatics.
Yeah, I guess. And especially Mormons, because Mormons are supposed to be really, really nice.
I didn't get that. Did it say somewhere Mormons? I just thought they were.
Aren't they from the Latter-day Saints Church?
I didn't see that, but.
Okay, Chad Schuckman and Tom Loomis had been bringing the message of the Church of the Resurrected Saints.
Oh, there we go. That's where that. Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry if there's any Mormon people out there listening. So actually, the Church of the Resurrected Saints.
Well, that's an easy mistake to make just based on the name. I mean, it's close.
Yeah, I was thinking the Church of Latter-day Saints, and I think they're mentioned as having these name tags on them.
Yeah.
So I kind of made the connection, so whatever.
So Church of Resurrected Saints is probably some kind of, evangelical Southern Baptists, but even more extreme.
About right.
Yeah.
So there's this tree that appears in the first part, Terra Incognita, when the thief finds Mamulian. Before he finds him, he finds himself in this square that has this kind of weird feeling, like it's almost like an eerie, silent. He actually looks at the tree in awe, because when he walks into a square and he sees what looks like white confetti blowing in the wind, and he goes like, "Oh, what is this?" And he looks and he sees this beautiful tree in the middle of the destruction. And this tree is the one that shows up again later in the book. The end of the book. Whenever someone goes into Mamulian's mind, this tree is there, and this tree, underneath the tree, you will find these revenants, and it's kind of hard. And this book is too big for us to do the same thing we used to do with the Books of Blood short stories, which is we would go through the plot line and mention it. So we're just going to be talking more generally about the story.
Yeah.
But it really feels amazing. It sounds really amazing whenever we're inside this Mamulian's mind, and especially the story of how he got his powers, because he's not a supernatural being per se, but he learned a few secrets from this monk.
Yeah.
These secrets gave him power, and
And that was kind of a big revelation, because all through the story, everybody, including a Whitehead, we're all trying to guess what he is. Is he even human? Is he the devil?
Yeah.
And there's, and Clive has said that this is his Faustian tale, but it's so secular.
And he maintains himself as a mysterious character. We just read about how he came to be, because I think it's Karis that sneaks into his mind, right?
Yeah.
And she reads him as he's sleeping or something, and then she finds out how he became who he is. Another thing is that also, as Breer is called the Razor Eater, and Joseph Whitehead is called the Pilgrim, we have Mamoulian being addressed as the European.
Yeah, and he calls himself the last European. Because he feels like, I think, at post-World War II, Europe was such a different place that that he feels like he's I don't know. Not being European, I guess.
I don't know. Maybe he's talking about, the old way of thinking about Europe as, in the old days, people would travel much more than they did after World War II. There'd be people who would do what they called le grand tour, which means that people would, after they became adults, and, oftentimes parents would send their kids on a trip through several countries, especially if they were rich families. Yeah. They would just go and visit a few countries, like for 1 or 2 years, and then come back and start working and stuff like that. So there was more of a cosmopolitan idea of unified Europe before the World War. And I don't think it ever came back apart from when the European Union began, and then of course all these, ideas about creating a federation, becoming like a federalist view of Europe, like the countries would become like federate states. Yeah. Much like the United States of America, there would be like a United Federated States of Europe, and they're still trying to make this go ahead. I mean, there's, just
not
trying to get
economically that makes sense, but culturally, Europe is, the different countries of Europe are so different from each other.
Yeah, it's very hard to accomplish that because, not trying to get into politics. Culturally, the countries are much more different between themselves than the United States are, among their own states.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Although I'm sure that probably someone from Connecticut will think that, someone from Texas is really different from them culturally.
Well, kind of. The United States was settled, all together from basically all the same people.
Yeah, the pioneers and the settlers. And I heard once that actually what the founding fathers intended for the people to call themselves would not be like Americans, but they would prefer people to call themselves like, I'm a Bostonian or I'm a Virginian or something like that, because the United States of America would not be like a country name; it would be like a denomination. And
that's more of a description than a name.
Yeah, and people would address to themselves more like the state they were from. So I don't know. Then of course people just picked up on being American, and that's when someone says I'm an American, we just know that they're from the United States of America.
Yeah, even though it's not really technically accurate because America is North and South America. Did you see? There's a documentary by Michael Moore called The Big One, where he was talking about that subject and how the United States of America is really more of a description, and we should have a cool name. We should call the United States of America the Big One.
Well, there you go. It's a possibility. Yeah. Just like, for example, Europe, or we call this the European Union, and there's countries in here that belong to the continent of Europe, and they're not in the European Union. Just as there are countries which are no longer part of Europe, the continent, and they're still in the European Union. So they're more like... it doesn't automatically mean that all the countries in Europe are in the European Union. So, But anyway, going back to the story, the last European, that I guess it meant that he saw the war as causing these fundamental rifts in the fabric of Europe, which probably is true. So maybe that's why...
it's more teased. It's not really overtly explained. A lot of the stuff that you wonder about through the whole novel does get explained, but not that. And also not this tribe of razor eaters.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I always thought that he was talking about the same kind of razor eaters that would be in carnivals and stuff like that.
That's kind of when I remember when I read it the first time. That's what I thought too. But then it seemed more like a people, and he was the last one. And it's a really sort of strange. I guess it's sort of a, tantalizes the imagination. What were these people? Why would they as a people want to eat razors?
Yeah, like I said, it almost looks like they do it as kind of a religious thing or something, like they're eating the communion host. Yeah. And it's a book that, now that you mention it, there are a lot of last ones in this book. Like there's the last European, there's the last of the razor eaters, and a lot of people in this book have they have their last chances at happiness, and like Karis and Marty.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's like the world becomes a better place, and the world becomes a better place because I guess it becomes less complicated and evil dies off in the end, and I don't know, love prevails. So in that aspect, it's got kind of a happy ending, although it's not as happy as some people would like it to be.
I remember reading a comment about that, and so I was specifically looking for that as I read the ending, and I thought, it's tied up decently well. You don't get the sense maybe that Karis and Marty are going to last as a couple. It seems like they're going to have difficult times ahead, just because of who they are.
Just like real life.
Yeah, exactly. And
at least they have a chance.
Yeah, this is not an escapist fiction. And I think that might be what separates it from Clive's other novels.
Yeah, usually characters go through this kind of transcendence and they turn into something different, and it's a positive experience. In this, it's like they survive their transcendence. They just barely survive it, and their best hope is just to lead a normal life and have a chance.
Well, and what's going to happen to Marty? I mean, if they don't go somewhere and hide, he's going to go right back to prison.
Exactly. And who knows what's going to happen afterwards. I mean, not trying to do spoilers, but of course Whitehead comes to a kind of bad ending, and his reprieve from prison relied on him keeping Joseph Whitehead safe, and that doesn't happen.
And Whitehead's ending is another it's another sort of a tie-in to Lord of Illusions, right? I mean, it's very, very similar there.
Funny things about the character names. There's a cellmate companion for Marty Strauss in the beginning of the book when we see Wandsworth and he's sitting there in prison. Pretty much gave up on any chance of a future. He's like, his wife is divorcing him, and he's like living inside a cell with a guy who keeps jerking off every day. There's one paragraph where he wakes up in the middle of the night after a dream, and the bunk bed is like shaking because his downstairs neighbor cellmate is masturbating. And this guy is called Fever, Feaver. And it's funny that there's also a Fever that appears in that unfilmed script for Hellraiser 3, which is a priest. So just, I don't know if there's
right.
I don't know if that's a coincidence or if it was something that, but there's
some
that
sort of inside joke with Clive and his friends, maybe.
Could be. I don't know. There's another funny scene where Fever is lying asleep on his bed, and Marty goes into the cell, and he finds that Fever has ripped off a vulva from one of his magazines, and he stuck it to his forehead with spit that looks like a third eye. And it's like he's sleeping, but he's got that thing stuck to his forehead like a third eye keeping watch. And these funny things that Clive puts in, they seem symbolic, and at the same time they seem really funny. Another thing about it is that I once talked to Clive on Twitter, and I asked him, so is Mamoulian from Damnation Game a homage to Ruben Mamoulian, who was an Armenian film and theater director? I mean, he worked in Porgy and Bess, and I think he also worked in The Wizard of Oz, and he worked as a Broadway stage director and all that stuff. And Clive Barker actually PM'd back to me, and he said, good call. Yep. So there you go. That comes from Ruben Mamoulian. Rouben, Mamoulian.
Yeah, and I always thought, what a strange name that seems sort of out of place.
Yeah, well, sometimes he will just create these weird names like John Fury Zacharias.
Yeah.
And other times, I guess he'll just use them to create these little discrete homages.
Yeah.
In this case, it was not so discrete, because when I Googled Mammalian, it only came up like this guy and the Mammalian from Damnation Game. So
yeah, and Mammalian, we never know if he has a first name or if that is his first name. Right? I mean, This is it, just Mammalian. That's all he's called besides, the last European.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember the part where he talks about the the origin of Mammalian when he is about to be executed.
Yeah. So that
ago.
Was, as a junior high school aged kid reading the Damnation Game for the first time, that scene sort of stuck with me and haunted me. That all those people lined up and getting decapitated, with swords and Mammalian making a joke to the guy next to him. He's in line to get his head cut off and making a joke to the guy next to him that there's what was it like?
Desertion.
Yeah, that's desertion if ever I saw it. Yeah, because as somebody gets their head cut off, all the lice and parasites, leave their body.
Yeah,
just the fountain of blood pushing somebody's head forward and it rolls through the snow and just that scene was so vivid and it just really stuck with me.
Yeah, we never really know when this is taking place. I'm trying to locate any clues.
Because Marty says, "What year?" and then Kara says, "What year is this?" and he's like, "Yeah, what a stupid question. It's like 1811 or whatever it is that he says."
Oh, okay, yeah. Right. I forgot that little detail. But yeah, and then eventually they're rescued in this monastery, and there are these monks that are just watching. And one of these monks is eventually going to be the one that's going to take Mammalian in, and he's going to teach him some of his secrets. And Mammalian basically has access to these secrets, and like you said, he's a very selfish character.
Yeah.
One of the first things that he does after he gets these secrets from the monk is he just gets rid of the monk.
Yeah, he strangles him in his sleep.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I learned all that I could from this guy. Now I'm just gonna, I'm gonna be the only one who knows this.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like the monk was any kind of threat to him at all. He just I don't need you anymore.
I have this idea that the monk kind of not looked forward to it, but kind of accepted that after he passed his secrets, that would be the fate that awaited him. Maybe the monk had been living for too long too.
Yeah, he was tired of living.
Yeah, I think isn't he doesn't even fight or something? I think that after.
Yeah, well, he got strangled in his sleep, but I think it was said in there somewhere that he had come to accept that.
It says here, I killed him when he taught me everything he could. I just throttled him one night when he was sleeping. Of course, he woke when he felt my grip around his throat, but he didn't struggle. He didn't make the slightest attempt to save himself.
Yeah.
He just let me murder him. And he said, I could scarcely believe my luck. I'd been planning the thing for weeks, terrified that he'd read my thoughts. When he went so easily, I was ecstatic. Stupid. So stupid. And then he talks about a trap. So it's because Mammalian is trying to walk into the darkness with Whitehead because he's basically just lived too long. And he's kind of he feels like it's time to die, but he can't die alone. He's too afraid to die alone. And this book has a
really complicated. It's a really complicated feeling that he has, right? Because he's not afraid to die. Like when he was going to get decapitated, he was terrified of getting caught, and he was terrified of all these people, questioning him and stuff. And he gave out all of his secrets immediately when he was being questioned by the other army. But when it was time to get executed, he was happy. And he spread his arms out and put his neck forward, and he's he was happy to die. So it's kind of a really complicated fear that he has.
Yeah. I guess that the only thing I can come up with is that when you're really anxious about something, about the worst happening to you, you kind of die several times just thinking about it. And then when the actual moment comes, you're in the middle of the worst thing that can happen to you. So what's the point of being afraid? Now you just accept. So I guess he just accepts it. And he just goes like, well,
that's a good
the only
point.
moment when he's probably free. He feels free because I have nothing to lose. I have seconds to live.
Yeah.
This is just this is it. So basically, it's kind of this acceptance that comes over him.
Yeah, and he felt that all of that fear and weight go back on his shoulders again as soon as the execution was interrupted, and he was free again to try to escape.
But this is a book that has a lot of characters afraid. Like Mamoulian is afraid of dying alone. Whitehead is afraid that Mamoulian is coming back for him. Marty is afraid of going back to prison. Karras is afraid because we haven't addressed this. But the thief, or Whitehead, has a power. He has like this knack. He has like this talent, which is almost like a power that they have.
He can see a little bit into the future and knows what choices to make are the ones that are going to benefit him the most.
Yeah, that's how he grew up an empire, an economical empire, and finance. And his daughter has the same kind of power, maybe even stronger than her father does. And that kind of like is the reason that she feels really awkward. Not really awkward, but she feels different, and this makes her feel awful, and that's why she probably got into drugs to numb this talent.
And Whitehead likes that she's on heroin because that means she's, avoiding the real world, and she'll stay with him instead of going off to Mamoulian to learn how to use her powers, which is one other thing that he's terrified of.
Yeah, because she doesn't know how to use her powers. That's why she feels so terrible. It's because she can't control her powers, and that's why she got into drugs.
Yeah.
And at the same time, as Whitehead provides her with drugs, he also says at one point to Mamoulian, "Don't hurt her, please. She's all that I got in this world." So he's still her father, but it's a twisted, sick kind of love. Because Joseph Whitehead is a sick, twisted kind of guy. I mean,
and
when
you get the feeling that Mamoulian, for him, it's like, oh, please don't hurt her. She's all that I have. And for him, it's like, bingo. Perfect.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I won't hurt her. And
he'll tell her that too. But he was thinking at the end, there's no way that Karras is going to survive this. She's going to die horribly.
Yeah. But so and the end sequence is just a horribly gruesome chapter. It's
holy cow, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a horribly gruesome chapter, and spoilers, Whitehead gets killed and his body gets defiled, and Mamoulian also gets killed after he's found in a weakened state by I feel like I'm really giving all of this away. Maybe I shouldn't say anything else, but Mamoulian is a tough guy to kill. I'll say this.
Yeah.
He's really a tough guy to kill. And when we think everything is over, then we still find that we're wrong. And and we find that we're wrong. And it's really gruesome, too. When we find that Mamoulian is really, really difficult to kill because life refuses to leave him, even after his body has been, killed thoroughly.
Yeah.
And Breer is just a horrible character. There's this scene where he we are introduced to this recollection of Breer in his prime when he was caught once eating the body of a little girl, that he would just fillet the meat from her thighs and just eat it raw like he was eating a fine carpaccio or something.
Yeah.
And it's just a really, really gruesome thing. And we have this, isn't there like and
Mamoulian knows that he's doing this, and he just turns his head away.
Yeah, yeah. And there's actually isn't there like a section where someone else eats that meat? Yeah. And they don't know it's human flesh?
Was it the dinner party that they were all sharing? No, it wasn't the dinner party. Marty met Whitehead in his white room, his special room that you're never supposed to go in. And he had a plate of meat that Mamoulian had given him. And Marty thought, oh, this is the most delicious meat I've ever had. And he finished it all off. Oh, God. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's horrible. That's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, compounded with the fact that it's cannibalism, it's also a little girl.
Yeah. So, Breer, the monster, he comes to a gruesome end as well.
Yeah.
Actually, not going to spoil it, but...
Yeah. Hopefully 90% of you listening to this have read this book. But if you haven't, and you're a Clive Barker fan, you definitely should. It was his first novel, written in 1985, so it's been out there for a while.
It reminds me of the ending that Frankenstein's monster comes to at the end of the book. It's like the monster realizes his own monstrosity, and he wants out, Yeah. Because when Mamoulian rescues him from death, he was actually, going through the whole ritual of, hanging himself. Like, he was washing his body, putting on his best clothes. He gets on top of a chair, puts the noose around his neck, and then just jumps off. And then he wakes up, and it's Mamoulian, like, slapping his face, like, hey, Breer, wake up, time to wake up. Yeah. And he's like, oh, no, why did you come back? Why didn't you let me die? Yeah. And we immediately see that Breer has met Mamoulian before. Yeah. And he knows who he's dealing with, and it scares the hell out of him.
And he owes some kind of a debt to Mamoulian.
Yeah. Because Mamoulian would have all these people in high places and low places. For example, Whitehead's empire is crumbling, and at one point we see Mamoulian confronting Whitehead in his penthouse, and a really symbolic thing is that as soon as Whitehead sees Mamoulian walk into the room, he's got a bowl of Halifax strawberries, and he looks at Mamoulian and he just goes on, picks one strawberry, eats it, and it's like, it reminds me of that allegory of the monk that falls down a cliff, and he holds on to a wild strawberry bush, and in the bottom of the pit there's like a lion, or at the top of the pit there's a lion, and at the bottom of the pit there's jagged rocks, and he's holding on for life to this wild strawberry bush, and he sees that there's one single solitary strawberry there, and it's like, okay, there's nothing I can do. I'll just pick the strawberry and eat it, and it's going to be the most delicious thing I'm ever going to eat, and it's going to be the defining moment of my life. I'm just going to taste this strawberry, and we get the feeling that that's what he's doing. He's like picking a strawberry, eating it, and we read the description of the taste of the strawberry, and it's like Whitehead is confronted with Mamoulian. It's like he's between a rock and a hard place. Yeah. Only thing he can do is just enjoy life while he has it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mamoulian is also so disgusted with life, with the business of the human body, right? He's disgusted with flesh. He's disgusted with the idea of sex.
Yeah, there's that scene where Karras and Strauss are being intimate with each other, and Mamoulian inadvertently gets into Karras's mind, and he gets into her head just as she's like climaxing, and he goes like, "Oh my God, this is horrible," and he just immediately escapes her head. Yeah. And Marty looks up and he sees that Karras's face is different. It looks kind of like a fish face or something. Yeah. And he freaks out a little bit. He goes like, "Whoa, what's that?" It's a weird moment. It's a weird moment.
Yeah, and Mamoulian, when he first comes on the property and the dogs attack him and they rip off his fingers and they rip him to shreds, and he doesn't even care. It's like, rereading this novel, I was thinking, oh yeah, does he grow his fingers back or something? I can't remember, but it's like, no, he just doesn't care about his body at all.
Yeah, because he's thinking about leaving it. He's thinking about dying. He feels like he's come to the end of the road, and he just wants to. I got this notion that maybe he stretched himself too thin, and he's kind of being haunted by his own revenants, because you see that all the souls of these people that he's taken over the years, they still reside to some extent inside him. Yeah, they're like underneath the tree that lives inside his darkness.
And they really want Whitehead in there, because once he goes in there, then Mamoulian will die, and then they all feel like, well, now we'll be free. Yeah. And I know that may not necessarily be true, but that's what they believe anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing, because Mamoulian was the card player who never lost a game, but Whitehead was the only one who ever won a game against him.
But then there's also this idea that maybe he let him win because he wanted.
He let him win.
Yeah, he liked him.
Maybe he recognized that Whitehead had this strange talent as well. He was like, well, maybe I can make this person become powerful, and then they will become like a brother to me, or like almost kind of like a queer thing, like Nix and Swan, Whitehead and Mullion kind of feel like they have kind of almost a platonic relationship.
And there was one really quick thought in Mamoulian's head at the end of the story when he's thinking about Chad and Tom, and he said he would have lusted over Chad or something like that.
Yeah, and there's also another thing when Whitehead is describing the card game, the original card game in Warsaw to Marty, that he says, I think Mamoulian let me win. I think he wanted me. And someone asks him, to share his bed, and he's like, well, no, not really, although that wouldn't be out of the question, or something like that.
Yeah.
So, again, it's Clive, making his, sensibilities apparent in the story. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. So, it's just these characters, it's like they want someone to spend eternity with. They're scared of being alone for eternity.
Yeah, and it's a vulnerability that defines them, and above everything else makes them cruel and terrible to everyone around them, except for the one person that they want.
One of the things that I also wanted to address in this story was that let me see my notes. Yeah. So also another thing that I don't know if it's symbolic or not, but it's a pretty well-known name. Mm-hmm. I think at one time Mamoulian is spending time in a house in Caliban Street.
Yeah.
Caliban is the name of that character from Shakespeare's The Tempest.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't know if that has anything to do with this. It's like he represents like the savage, like the kind of a half-breed creature. So I don't know if that has any symbolism, but right. Caliban was also always this name that I always recognized from Shakespeare. So
wasn't Calibos the creature in Clash of the Titans that he cut the sack with Medusa's head in it and created the monsters and
the old Harryhausen.
Harryhausen. Yeah, he was he was like a half man, half demon kind of a creature.
Oh yeah. I know which one you mean. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When Perseus cut off Medusa's head, Perseus was the hero, and right. That was from the 1980 film.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the remake, but I barely remember anything from it.
Mm-hmm.
Giant scorpions, and I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe Caliban has some origin. The name comes from that other character. I don't know. I don't really remember if that was an actual Greek myth character or if they made it up for the film. I'm not familiar with that. But
I can't remember either. I mean, I had known the story of Perseus, in college, but that's a while ago now.
Yeah. But I really like the beginning quotes for each part in the Damnation Game because they're really, really symbolical.
Yeah, they're really pertinent to the story.
They're really pertinent. And it's like for Terra Incognita, there's this line that says, "Hell is the place of those who have denied. They find there what they planted and what dug, a lake of spaces and a wood of nothing, and wander there and drift and never cease wailing for substance," which has to do with basically what's inside Mamoulian, right? I mean, it's like this emptiness, and these ghosts are inside him, and they're like wailing for, but they have this hunger that never ceases, and they want Whitehead to join them. And it's almost like hell is inside him. So, and then for part two, For part 2, they're really good quotes. I mean, the quote for the whole book, the quote that opens the book, is from Prometheus Unbound. It says, "Nor yet exempt, though ruling them like slaves, from chance, death, and mutability." So that's from Shelley, Prometheus Unbound, the poem.
Yeah.
So all these parts, they're wonderfully divided.
One thing I could say, the system for separating the chapters is a little confusing, because you have part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, right? And then you also have regular chapter numbers that completely ignore what part they're in, because you could have a chapter like 56 in which is in underneath Roman numeral 11, which is in the Deuce, which is part 3. Mm-hmm. So it's a little, it's nice. It gives you little places to stop. There's lots of little places that you can stop and take breaks, but it's not done like an outline. It's done like I'm dividing it up into like 100 little chapters, but I'm also dividing it up into 4 parts, but I'm also dividing it up into these Roman numeral chapters within the parts.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I mean, it seems like a rather complicated way.
Yeah.
But, when you're reading a book, you tend to overlook those chapters and those breaks. I mean,
well, and it's on this subsequent reading that I noticed that it wasn't, it never bothered me before.
Yeah, but I like the book. Like you said, it might have a few shortcomings in terms of sympathetic characters but I think it wraps up really nicely. I think for a first novel, it's amazing. It's an amazing effort.
Yeah.
You really see a lot of things here that define Clive Barker's style. Like these names that he gives to characters, and these mysterious origins, the Faustian nature of this story, which is I'll make you powerful and I'll make you richer than your heart's desire, and then I'll come back and collect your soul from you.
Yeah.
Which basically the premise of this book.
Well, and it's interesting too that this covenant that Mamoulian feels like they have, this pact. Whitehead keeps on saying, "I never made any pact with you. What are you talking about? Just leave me alone. I've given you everything I can give."
Well, I think Mamoulian warned him that he played for high stakes.
Yeah.
And I don't really know exactly what else they spoke about, but there's
not exactly as as the tale of Dr. Faustus is not exactly as cut and dried as I signed this pact and I know exactly what I owe and I'm trying to get out of it. It's a lot more vague.
It's like the pact is sealed with a card game, and it's like But one of the things that I didn't address a while ago was that as Whitehead's empire is crumbling, there's one mention that this might be Mamoulian's doing, because he has a lot of friends in high places, and maybe at one point he started collecting some favors and trying to get Whitehead to become less, trying to crumble his empire.
In a way get his attention too.
Yeah, probably in a way to prepare him to get used to the idea that things are fading away from him, the carpet is coming out from under his foot.
Yeah, you're on your own, all you have is me.
Yeah, exactly. He even goes so far as to, kill his friends and take his daughter away from him, trying to force him into walking into the darkness. And, so I would recommend it.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's a really good book.
Yeah, and you and I probably judge Clive Barker on a much higher standard than we judge other books. So if we say that there are shortcomings to this novel, it's not like the same thing as saying like if it were a Piers Anthony novel or something, right? I mean,
right. Well, there are books which we will discuss that I will say that I don't like them so much.
Yeah.
I mean, the ones I mean, and I will address some of the things that I think. Yeah. I think it's fair to give an honest review, not to say everything is great, everything is wonderful, I love everything. I really think that I have to be honest, not only to yourself, to the people out there, and to myself.
Yeah.
And say, well, I like this book, but I think this should be different. In this case, this book, I think I read it a couple of times and a half, and I couldn't finish it for the podcast, but I'm speaking from memory for a lot of these things. And I really am glad to have this book, and I would love to have a better version of it, because what I have is just a paperback, although it's in pristine condition. Even though I read it a couple of times, I'm really careful with my books. I try not to crack the spines and all that stuff.
Yeah. You know, I used to, when I first got into Clive Barker, and I was reading his stuff every day, and I was in a high school class, and I was reading a paperback, I think of Cabal. And I think I was rereading Cabal, and some kid came in to the classroom and jerked the book out of my hand and said, "Why don't you just read it like this?" And he bent it completely around backwards so that the back and front covers were touching each other.
Oh, God.
And I was so angry, I really just wanted to punch him. But
my goodness.
No one would ever understand, why I'm so angry, and I just let it go, but...
The only time, and of course we are now sharing our little stories about being fans, the only time I actually ever lent a book from Clive Barker to another person, it had to be Imagica. And I just, I gave this friend of mine Imagica, and I said, "Hey, read this book. It's really nice." We were really good friends at the time. And I gave him the book. And he came back to me like weeks afterwards. It's like, "Oh, the book is nice. I'm having kind of trouble finishing it, And he shows me the book, and Imagica, the paperback, is really thick, especially that volume that has all that vortex.
It looks like a cube almost.
Yeah. And I just look at the book, and the book is all scratched up. The cover is all bent, and all the corners are white. And
and it's probably got all these creases down the spine.
Oh my God! He had like a dozen creases down the spine. You can hardly read Imagica in the backbone of the book. And I was like, "What did you do to my book? I told you to be careful with the book. And I love this book. Why did you do this to the book?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, I'm sorry. Well, here you go. Have the book. I don't want it anymore." And I'm like, "Oh man, And we were still friends, but I was like, I'm never giving this guy anything ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. Or unless it's extra and you don't ever want it back.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I stopped buying paperbacks, too, is that you work so hard and it's so easy to mess them up. You try so hard.
Yeah, just stick that thing in a backpack with a few things, your keys in there, and there you go. You key the cup.
Yeah, or the cover gets folded back somehow and you get a giant crease in it.
Yeah, and, the book is still there. You can still read it. But... It's like having a new bike. You're really, really careful until you fall down for the first time and you completely wreck the paint job, and then you just don't care about it anymore.
Yeah.
And like, oh, well, there you go. And I try to avoid that, because whenever I have a paperback and it's all busted up, then I really don't care about it so much anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's just our little stories about.
So we both highly recommend the Damnation Game. This is more. I think we both agree that it's more horror than fantasy. But but there is some fantasy elements to it. It's not. It's not the first book of his that I would recommend. But if you want to, if you're like me and a little bit obsessive, I wanted to read everything that he did in the order that they were written, and that's how I started. And so I started with the Books of Blood, and then the Damnation Game, and then, and then the Hellbound Heart. And
I think I started off with Cabal, then I read the Books of Blood, and then I think it was either the Damnation Game or Weave World, and then the Damnation Game. So
I read Cabal first because Nightbreed was my gateway drug, I guess.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So I did read Cabal first, and then I wanted to read everything in order, and I reread Cabal when I got to Cabal's place in the timeline. Yeah.
Oh, geez, but before I read Cabal, I had seen Hellraiser, I had read the comics, I had read Nightbreed comics, I had seen the movie Nightbreed, and then I read Cabal.
Jeez.
So
I just saw the movie Nightbreed, and then it's like, okay, now I have to read everything by Clive Barker, and I was kind of a purist as far as like only wanting to read or see the movies that he did himself.
I think I might have seen Hellraiser back in '89 or something.
Oh, okay. And I saw Hellraiser 3 in the theater, and I saw Candyman in the theater. Those were, I think, in the same year. But the other ones I had all just rented before that. Because I missed the chance to actually see them when they were in their theatrical run. Yeah.
So, do you want to add anything else about the book?
No. I think that we got it covered pretty well. You know, we're sorry if we spoiled anything. We're trying to do this in a way where we don't completely ruin the whole book, like not like the way we did it with Books of Blood.
Well, the book came out 27 years ago.
Yeah. So if you're a Clive Barker fan, probably 90% of you have read this. But if you haven't, we are going to recommend it.
Yeah.
So,
do we have any feedback?
We do. So from the forum, David wrote us kind of a note. He said, I finally got a chance to listen to it for a show about nothing, and this is the last 2 weeks ago episode where we weren't quite done with the Damnation Game, so we did a show where we just talked about the news and kind of debated stuff. For a show about nothing, it sure went on for a long time. I liked it. For the record, I would enjoy a 2-hour Blade Runner podcast. That was kind of out of our purview, but it would be fun to talk about. He said, hey, speaking of Clive's grandfather, the podcast's mention of his photo made me remember when I spent an afternoon researching his name. In the Midnight Meat Train credits, it says, gallery painting by Rocco Pavarelli, as played by Clive Barker. I then found the name Rocco Pavarelli again in Peter Atkins' Hellraiser comic script Songs of Metal and Flesh, and we've talked about that one before. You're right, where they made that's right, it was our Lord of Illusions and Last Illusion episode, where we talked about it making instruments out of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we talked about it before. So anyway, he says, here's the excerpt. Panel 9, overhead shot close on a desk surface, as if Jason's point of view, we are focused on the cover of the book, of which Jason's back-gloved hand rests. The cover reads, Aurelia by Gerard de Nerval. In the background, the spines of the books are visible, and we can see authors' names such as De Robitaille and Rocco Pavarelli.
Which is really interesting, because Daniel Robitaille was the real name for the Candyman character.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if this was intentional. Probably it was. And Gerard Nerval is a real French writer and theater, writer. He became famous because he was such an eccentric. He would walk around the streets of Paris, walking a lobster with a collar on her. So things like that. Things like that. It was this little tiny guy, and he actually abused his body so much he died really young.
So he said, another couple of hours of digging, and I found out Rocco Pavarelli was his maternal grandparent. Why they use this name is still a mystery, and he put in asterisks, useless trivia.
Well, it's actually pretty darn interesting. Thanks for checking out those little things.
Yeah. On Facebook, Andrew Kopp said, could you see this being made effectively into a movie? How would you cast it? So the first question, what we kind of talked about before is how similar this is to Lord of Illusions. And I've been, in my mind, imagining this as a movie as I've gone along, and there are some parts that made me feel a little squeamish about, wow, seeing, if I saw this in a movie, it would be pretty violent and depressing, I think.
Yeah.
But probably a good movie. Yeah. Well, I don't know if I should.
As for the question, could you see this being made effectively into a movie? I guess so. Mm-hmm. It has all the makings of a good horror movie. It's got a love story. It's got a happy-ish ending. Mm-hmm. It's got monsters. It's got some funny moments. It's got zombie dogs in it, which Resident Evil fans would love.
Yeah.
As for how would you cast it? Geez, that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe Breer in my mind. Have you seen Darkman?
Yeah.
With Liam Neeson. Do you remember the villain from that movie, Durant?
No.
Okay, Larry Drake, the actor who played Durant in Darkman. I would see him as a good Anthony Breer.
Yeah.
I would see him as a good Breer, and then maybe for Karras, I don't know. I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm probably going to get flack for this, but Kristen Stewart as Karras. There, I said it.
Ah. Gotcha.
Yeah. I don't know. I think she'd be perfect to play a junkie. You know.
Huh.
That kind of like flat tone, flat face that she's got. Maybe that would be great for playing Karras.
And what about Marty?
I don't know. Maybe Tom Hardy. Yeah. I've seen him in Bronson. Have you ever seen Bronson?
No.
He plays this character who's in prison. He's been in prison most of his life, and he spent a lot of time in solitary confinement. And the character he likes to identify the most is with Charles Bronson in all his movies. And he grows a mustache, and he actually at one point he's embodying Charles Bronson. He's incorporating all the characters that he did into his own persona. So I don't know. Maybe Tom Hardy would be a good choice for Marty. I don't know. He's got that look, you know, for ex-con. I've seen him do a convict prisoner, so he's good in there. As for Luther, stereotypes aside, the chauffeur, I think he would be great if he was played by Tony Todd. Yeah. Or Michael Clark Duncan, but unfortunately he's passed away.
Yeah.
I'm not even going through descriptions in the book. I'm just going for what I think would be something I would like to see. Even though if some character is mentioned to be blonde or white or black, I'm just going for what I would like to see cast in there. Yeah. Maybe Joseph Whitehead. My first idea would have been Anthony Hopkins, because you remember Meet Joe Black?
Yes.
Where death is coming to pick him up, and he's like dealing with it, and he's got all these feelings about dying and leaving things fixed before he dies. He also has a daughter in that movie.
Yeah.
I would go, but Anthony Hopkins seems to be too strong an actor to play Joseph Whitehead. I think we need to see someone a little more frail. And recently I've seen Richard III played by Ian McKellen. And I think Ian McKellen is a really good actor at playing, a stately character fallen to madness and disgrace, like Richard III. And I think Ian McKellen would make a great Joseph Whitehead. He can have this really powerful presence like Gandalf, and at the same time, I've seen him in roles where he just looks like he's about to crumble and fall over because he's so vulnerable. So maybe Ian McKellen. Another runner-up would be Christopher Plummer.
Well, and Ian McKellen has worked on a Clive Barker movie before. Yeah.
As for Mamoulian, it's kind of hard. I visualize Mamoulian as this kind of like or of course an European actor, not an American one, but I would go for you remember Alien 3?
Yeah.
You remember the Doctor Prisoner?
Oh yeah.
Charles Dance.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe Charles Dance would be a good Mamoulian. I could see that happening.
Yeah.
Or Udo Kier.
I don't know who that is.
Udo Kier. Was it Flesh for Frankenstein? Geez, I mean, I remember the names in Portuguese of the movies, but hang on, let me try to.
Okay.
All right, Udo Kier. He's been in. Jesus Christ, Melancholia. Mm-hmm. He's been in Halloween. He's been in the Masters of Horror TV series. He's seen Cigarette Burns. He's the rich guy, Bellinger. Oh, you haven't seen that one?
No, I only watched the Clive Barker ones.
Oh gosh, you're missing out. You should see John Carpenter's Cigarette Burns. It's an amazing episode. You should look at that whenever you can. What else has he been in? He's been in Manderley, the movie, 2005. He's been in Dogville. He's been in a lot of movies, a lot of cool movies. Shadow of the Vampire, End of Days, Stingers, and those old movies when he was really young. I mean, those old horror movies, like he plays Frankenstein. Frankenstein-like character. Yeah, I mean, he played Hitler in the movie. He's in Andy Warhol's Frankenstein as Baron Frankenstein. He's been in a lot of movies. Udo Kier, really big actor. I mean, you've probably seen him in a few movies. You just never attached the name to the face.
Yeah.
He's been in a lot of movies. It's just
yeah.
So Udo Kier or Charles Dance.
Yeah.
And as for, I could even mention someone as Mamoulian, which would probably people would go like, "Oh, come on, be serious." But Christopher Walken,
Oh, I can see that
as Mamoulian. I mean, if he could stop speaking like this, maybe he could. Maybe he could make a really good Mamoulian because he's got that special kind of face.
Yeah.
And, you have to change the hair.
And he's the Continental.
Yeah, even though Christopher Walken is American.
Yeah.
But I guess that would be my cast reply. What would your dream cast be?
I would only say funny ones.
Okay.
So another question we got from Eric Fabiashi. He said, personally, one of my favorite novels by Clive, and perhaps only second to The Hellbound Heart. There's something very Ramsey Campbell about it, perhaps its style and substance. I think that's fair to say. I mean, I've only probably read maybe 2 Ramsey Campbell novels. I haven't read a lot of them. But yeah,
I only read a couple of short stories from Ramsey Campbell too. So
I read one novel that was about like some kind of a what was it? Some kind of a Welsh mythology, but I can't remember exactly what it was. Druid stuff, but yeah, I like Ramsey Campbell, but not as much as Clive Barker.
Yeah. By the way, speaking about Clive Barker, have you noticed that Clive's Twitter feed has been? I think someone attached something. Maybe someone connected the Twitter feed to Facebook.
Yeah.
Now, every time Clive Barker uploads a picture to Facebook, there's a little tweet saying, I made a new photo. I posted a new photo to Facebook, and there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tweets like that in a row.
Yeah. And vice versa, right? When he posts stuff on Twitter, it ends up on Facebook, too.
Yeah. You might want to check that, because that... that's kind of useful because it links directly to Facebook. But, having like 7 tweets like that in a row, maybe that's a little too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that too. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that it's my favorite novel of his. I guess it depends on what you're looking for. Like there's that reviewer we were talking about that got so angry about The Great and Secret Show being all like fantasy and not enough horror. So, there's the people that, and I'm not saying that Eric is that way at all, because I don't think so. But there are people that want him to be a horror author, and when he sort of, branched out and got more fantastical, there are some people that really didn't like that. But, there might... Didn't that
happen more when he released Weaveworld?
Yeah, it did. But that one article we talked about, from that guy that really was trashing the Lord of Illusions prequel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. And he talked about how The Great and Secret Show was so terrible and it's, right. And it's all this fantasy that no one can understand. Or
yeah, you're talking about the Great Unknown, Harry Damour's First Adventure review. By Andy Mangels in Fantasia magazine. Yeah,
that's the one.
I can see that. Yeah.
So I think that there is a little bit of I kind of wish that he would be more horror and less fantasy, and this is definitely fits that bill. And this one and the Hellbound Heart and Cabal, they're all. Cabal may be a little more fantasy.
Yeah. And if that's if out there for people out there, if that's your preference, you'd like to see more gruesome stuff. I'm sure that when Black is the Devil's Rainbow: Tales of a Journeyman comes out, And the Scarlet Gospels. Maybe that will be more to your liking because you're going to get to see Hell again and Cenobites and
Clive
more short stories.
Yeah, and Clive has said that the Scarlet Gospels is going to be more like a Magica in tone.
Mm-hmm. Which is awesome. I mean, I'm just wondering, how long is it going to take to edit that? Because that's been being edited for, what, like a couple of years now?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, so I really like to see that come out like in 2013 or something.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, but if you're out there, don't pester him on Twitter about when his Scarlet Gospel's coming out. Because, I mean, that's been happening constantly.
Yeah.
And on Facebook or, email. I mean, everybody wants that book to come out as much or more than we do.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm all for it. Yeah. I would gladly see Scarlet Gospels come out before any other thing comes out next. So I'm one of those people. I'm really looking forward to Scarlet Gospels.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it would be crazy for a publishing company to not want to publish that.
Yeah, because, it's connected directly to the Hellraiser stories.
Yeah.
So Hellraiser is one of Clive's hottest properties.
Yeah, and if it's good enough, then then it's a movie. I mean, if it's or a trilogy, if it's a big fat book, which it sounds like it is.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Movie adaptations based on Clive Barker's work have this tendency to be hit or miss, and they take forever to come out.
They get the rights from the publishing company to adapt the novel, right? I mean, so my point, I guess, is that it's commercially, crazy.
It's complicated because the Hellraiser brand is owned by the Weinstein Company, so they own the rights to anything Hellraiser being put on celluloid.
Right, but presumably HarperCollins is going to own and Clive Barker will own the rights to this story from this novel.
Well, Clive Barker owns the rights to write about Hellbound Heart and Hellraiser and Pinhead in novel form, of course. That's completely his. But the rights to make like a Hellraiser TV series belong to someone else.
Yeah.
And the rights to make a Hellraiser film belong to the Weinstein Company.
Yeah.
So these are, different properties, different media, and the rights belong to different people. So it's kind of a mess here.
Well, but I mean, if it's a good enough, popular enough story, then they'll find a way with money to make it happen.
I just don't want to see the Scarlet Gospels get adapted by the Weinstein Company.
I know, but from their perspective, it's It should be no brainer.
As it has Pinhead, it has Hell, it has Cenobites. Yeah. If they ever make a movie, it would be, it'd have to be with the Weinstein Company.
And it has Harry D'Amour, which is, Clive Barker fans love Harry D'Amour.
Yeah. Well, I don't know who the cinematic rights to the Lord of Illusions thing belong to, but I'm hoping it's Clive Barker. So, I mean, and also the Hellraiser comics, the rights belong to Clive Barker. So, basically the cinematic is just belongs to... He sold those away when he made the first Hellraiser for like, $1 million or something like that?
Yeah.
Which was basically used to make the movie. So, it's like a bit of a Faustian bargain there as well. Yeah. It's like he sold the rights to make Hellraiser to... and Mephistopheles in Hollywood.
Yeah. Well, and he thought, who's gonna my little movie here? Who's gonna, are they really gonna be making a sequel to that?
Yeah.
But then everybody got so excited about it, they were already planning Hellraiser 2 and 3 while Hellraiser 1 was still being made.
Yeah, I know. So anyway, but I'm really looking forward to that book, Scarlet Gospels, and so what is going to be the next episode for the podcast?
So next time we are going to be talking about rare comics.
All right, rare comics.
Yeah, so like Night of the Living Dead, London, that Clive Barker did with Steve Niles.
Yeah.
Seduth.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other ones that you would add to that list? Because the longer series are going to be, in their own episodes, but this one I wanted to do like one-offs, or maybe there's one or two issues of something.
Have you ever read the Nightbreed stories that came out in Epic 1 and 2?
No.
So next episode will be rare comic stories.
Yeah. Yep. And then we're looking to do a couple of interviews after that. And then we'll be talking about rare short stories that don't appear in the Books of Blood. And that should finish off the year for us. And then we'll be going into 2013.
Oh, cool. All right, so those are the next 2 episodes. So everybody out there who's interested, you know what's coming up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And those 2 interviews, which will be surprise.
Yeah.
We will announce those whenever they're confirmed, right?
Yeah. Yep. We're waiting for a few things, and then that those should happen probably in November, early November. Oh, and we will have the episode that we recorded with the people from the Hellraiser podcast. That's going to be coming up here pretty soon. I think they announced that was their next episode on the last episode that they recorded. So, as a courtesy, we're waiting until they put it up first, because it was their idea to talk to us about Occupy Midian. So once they do that, then we'll put it up as kind of a bonus episode also.
Oh, yeah, that was a really cool conversation.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
And for people who subscribe to both, we'll have to apologize because you're going to hear it twice, but...
Yeah, there might be a few differences, but ours will be probably longer. I don't know. I mean... Yeah. Because we tend to include everything, even the Blade Runner conversation. So
yeah, you can find us on the web at www.clivebarkercast.com. We are on iTunes. You can subscribe and leave a review. Those episodes on iTunes are out of order. Ever since I resubmitted them, for some reason Apple put them in a weird order. You can find us on Facebook or the Occupy Midian group. Twitter, we're at BarkerCast, or also at Occupy Midian. And the forum is www.timewinds.com/Clive. And the official website for Occupy Midian is www.occupymidian.com. And Crystal Rain, who normally does our Occupy Midian report, you can find her at www.bringbacknightbreed.blogspot.com.
All right, so stay tuned for more announcements, and, thanks for listening.
All right, thank you. Hello, this is Ryan again. In the original airing of this episode, we had the song Sold My Soul by Merciful Fate right here. In order to respect the rights holders, we have removed it from the episode. I recommend you find Sold My Soul by Merciful Fate and give it a listen. That's on Merciful Fate's album 9 from 1999. Anyway, thanks for understanding, and this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end.